welcome to this episode of BrookwoodBytes. Thank you all for joining me. Today we'll be discussing the first article in a series of 5, which focuses on the common components required to build a Saas application. The series of articles is by Vish, who I'm joined with today. Vish is definitely someone who's extremely experienced and knowledgeable in this field. Would you mind telling us a bit about your background today, Vish?
Oh, hi Lily. Thanks for the opportunity. So my background, I am a software engineer by profession. I studied MS in software engineering. I have a couple of AWS certifications. I've done all the certifications available in BCS. I've done 2 TOGAF certifications. Have around 18 years experience in the industry. So I've played multiple roles. I've been a developer, I've been a tech lead, I've been a solution architect. My current role is with British Council. I'm working on migrating their existing websites, websites like TOEFL, which is an English exam website, IELTS, and a few other core British Council websites into AWS. So this is a complete greenfield project. So that's me. Expertise in AWS, very good understanding in software design patterns, and close to a couple of decades in software engineering.
Definitely very humble answer there by Vish. I will definitely say when he said a couple of AWS certifications, it is multiple. So very humble indeed. I just wanted to ask 2 questions regarding the first article, which obviously covers the overall architecture. So briefly, what are the common architectural components required to build a Saas application?
Yeah, sure. First off, very briefly as to what the series is about. The series in itself is a series of 5 articles to explore some of the core ideas and principles around the SaaS application. I've seen a lot of clients building SaaS application in various different ways. There is this traditional way of building a SaaS application pre-cloud, which is you do all the configuration when you get a new customer, and then go and deploy the application in their on-premise location. The post-cloud, so there are some core principles that we can apply to make the application and the components reusable and take advantage of cloud economics, and reuse a lot of components while isolating the data. So the series in itself focuses, it's 5 articles, as I said, and it kind of focuses on various topics that's critical for SaaS application. Things like, obviously the first article is about overall architecture, an overview. And then we go into scalability, we go into security, business continuity, cost optimization, and so on. Right. So to answer your question, so what are the core components that we'll have to look at for a SaaS application, right? So when we think about SaaS application, how should it behave, right? So the key thing in a SaaS application is we build application once. We do not repeat the configuration multiple times when we onboard a new customer. It should all be automated in the background. When we collect data from a customer, or when we store customers' data, we will have to focus on isolating data, looking at users specific to that customer, and so on. Now, a classic or my favorite SaaS application is Confluence and Jira. So everyone would have used Confluence and Jira. We use it. When we think of it as a SaaS application, then we wonder as to how do they scale, right? So they scale, the application scales, it goes to internet scale. So it's globally available. How do they isolate data? So what if a Jira ticket raised in HSBC is visible to, say, an insurance company? How would that look like, right? So how do they isolate data? And what are the core cogs that drives the SaaS application? So the most important component, I'll come to user access management and so on. But then the most important component that I will focus on is a component that will have to be context aware, right? So what do I mean by context? By context, I mean the component should know which user from which organization is accessing the application and what sort of data is that user uh, should be able to access, right? And if you think about that, it's not just data; it's also resources, right? Things like APIs and things like reports and so on. We could call this component as a context service, a customer context service, right? Now, apart from this, there are other, obviously, you said briefly, so there are other components like user access management. So as I said, how are we going to isolate the user, right? How are we going to perform authentication and authorization? What additional feature do we require in addition to OAuth 2.0 standard flows, right? Then we'll have a standard front end, which is either hosted as a static website or a server-side rendering. We'll have to think about how do we host it, right? Then the backend microservices, and then the storage layer, where you store data in ODS and have a NoSQL like DynamoDB. Then the data access layer. So this is interesting. So one of the key problems that an application, a SaaS application would have is the madness of calling endpoints, right? So you have multiple backend microservices, and the front end ends up calling hundreds of endpoints. And first of all, REST calls are expensive. And then when you start calling endpoints, multiple endpoints on one page, for example, it becomes extremely complicated, and also the performance on that page will be impacted heavily. So we'll have to think about how this data access layer can be designed, right? Then obviously, finally, last but not least, the data warehouse component. So we need a solid data warehouse for analytics. Though in this series I've not covered data warehouse, it's going to be another series because data warehouse in itself is a huge topic.
Yeah.
So I think those are the core components of a SaaS application.
Perfect. Thank you so much for explicating that. You mentioned regarding user access. That goes on to my final question, which is how would you separate the users from company A and company B? How would you manage the access to specific functionalities?
Yeah. So we have standard patterns, like I said before, OAuth 2.0. So that's a standard user access flow pattern. What that does is that kind of authenticates and authorizes users. Now, the question is, when we think about authorization and scope for a user, do we go ahead and build our own authorization service? Or do we use one of the readily available authorization service, which is much more cheaper? Things like Auth0 or Okta, they provide very good authorization services, which integrates with AWS seamlessly. We can have SAML integration between Auth0 and Cognito. I've written an article about that as well. And that's not part of the series, but it's a separate article. It's available in the blog.
We'll link that below.
Yeah, link below. Auth0 allows you to create applications and scopes and also roles. We can automate all of this when a new customer onboards themselves on the application. That's how it should be. It should be someone goes into the application, claims360.com. That's the scenario that I've given in the article. Then a customer should say, I am company ABC, I want to use Claims 360, this is my organization, these are my users, and these are the roles. Then in the back end, what should happen is all of these users will get onboarded onto Cognito, which is automatically integrated with Auth0. And Auth0 will have readily available scopes, which will be exposed at the front end for user and group management. Then when a user signs in there, based on the Auth0 scope, and Cognito provides authentication. When a user says log in with username and password, we can use Cognito to authenticate, or we can use Auth0 to authenticate as well. So basically, the OAuth 2.0 flow says you authenticate, get an authorization code, and then use that authorization code to access the resource. The authorization token is nothing but a JOT token that will have scope and user privilege, whether he's a valid user or not, and so on. It's a JOT token. If you go to jot.io, you'll be able to parse the token. But then when I said all of this, there's one missing piece. When a customer onboards themselves in the SaaS application, loading in Cognito, Auth0 Cognito integration scope, all of that is fine. But then how would the scope be different for every customer, right? So if customer A has signed up for a silver package, for example, and customer B has signed up for a platinum package, how are we going to differentiate the scope? And how would we know customer A and customer B at all? Like what service in the application will know, right? So that's when they started talking about SaaS application. I said the first important component is the customer context service. So this customer context service should work along with the authorization service, right? And it should, when a customer onboards themselves, the customer context service should first register the customer into the application's database. And then that is the cog that will drive the scope, that will drive the Auth0 integration, and so on. So I've implemented a similar design in the past with Deloitte. Right now with British Council, I'm working something like this. Yeah, so that's pretty much how you would isolate user and provide user access management for a SaaS application.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that detailed response, Vish. Really appreciate your time today. I first off will have to apologize. I think we've had a little bit of connectivity issues, so that's why your video is not being showing up. But not to worry at all. I believe we've got all of the audio. So I just wanted to say and make it very clear that this series of articles will be released weekly. We will also be having weekly interviews on each particular article. So please do share your questions or thoughts below, because we can cover this in the next episode. So do stay tuned to the series. I will link everything below, and we welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Vish, for joining me. Really appreciate it. Take care.